Well, hello again, everybody. You may remember me from earlier on, but if not, my name is Sean Bennett. I'm our Consumer Markets Director at Shape for EMEA. Wanted to take 20 minutes with you this afternoon. I know it's been a long day. Appreciate all the engaging conversation that just we've had, so I assume that you've been as active in your sessions. Just to cover off some of the key issues that we're finding our larger retail customers are having around controlling fake traffic, and it's generally three categories. It's good traffic and how we can better identify known customers that are coming back to us, maybe from new devices, maybe from different locations. How we can deterministically and clearly identify when it's bad traffic that we want to push somewhere else or block entirely. And then how we can deal with the sometimes ugly, so the relationships that we get into to drive conversions, like affiliates and SEO relationships, that can sometimes be abusive. They can sometimes either be committing fraud or sometimes overloading our systems with traffic driving SEO. There'll be a bit of time for questions at the end, and we are hosting the drinks reception at the Fox on the Green as well, so I'm happy to answer questions there at the end. So a lot of this is about getting better handle on and knowing your visitor. So the fraud tools do a great job at knowing your customer. Once someone's committed, something's in the basket, and they're adding details. But there's a lot of issues that tie into e-commerce long before that we get to that step. So on the theme of let's recap. So the aim of the game, what is it every day we get out of bed to do? Well, generally, from our retail customer perspective, that is sustainably increasing and growing our e-commerce business. And from our interactions, generally fits into two categories. Maximizing conversions right at the head, increasing average order value, and then once we've got a loyal, committed customer, we can build a relationship, start to develop that lifetime value of that customer. At the other end of the business, there's the minimizing cost. So minimizing or getting the most effective marketing conversion rate that we can. Minimizing our operations costs. Looking to see how we can get the right merchandise and drive the best merchandising efficiency. And then ultimately fighting fraud and making sure that bad actors aren't coming in and just defrauding the system. So if that's the aim of the game and the basic structure, we generally see retailers approach this with some key initiatives. Pricing competitively, making sure that we're in the market and we're priced well, so that if that's optimizing through a search engine and that channel, we're well positioned. But for our repeat customers, they feel they're getting value and that they feel we're priced right for the value that we're offering. Second area is personalization. So if we're attracting new customers and converting those campaigns, or we're looking to really drive that lifetime value, a lot of the initiatives now around personalized information and communication on a permissions-based. So people are opting into the relationship with us. They don't feel like we're deliberately and purposefully marketing to them, but it's a nice, seamless, personalized experience at every touch point. Third key initiative is then eliminating the friction, getting stuff out of the way of people starting to interact with us and starting to move themselves through the funnel, move themselves through the journeys on our mobile apps and our websites. And then around all of that, increasing conversion. So in this kind of broad theme of initiatives, it's better credit options, it's making sure that our delivery options are well placed and we're able to deliver on those. And that behind all of those four key initiatives, that we're driving that off of a platform of real-time data analysis and inventory management. So if that's the kind of game today and the key things that people are playing, what's the challenge? Well, the challenge that there are forces working against us achieving these things and doing them well. And a lot of the intent behind these bad actors or these forces are sometimes quite nefarious. Sometimes it is to compromise accounts and it is to steal balances and commit fraud. It can be more innocent than that in accessing pricing and accessing features on our sites and apps. But doing that at the cost and the expense of another user who may be bumped off their journey or traffic's not prioritized around and impacts their journey. So we're in this position where customers value convenience, They value all these options around how we can fulfill goods and how they can interact with us digitally, but they hate friction. That gives very limited space for visitor validation. It gives very limited space to be able to make this determination of, is this someone that I should provide a prioritized journey for? Is this a customer coming back that I should accelerate through the journey? Or is this a bad actor that I should block or manage in another way? And it's in that gap that we see this, the bad and the ugly out of this traffic. So the challenge is that that side of the game, if you like, has developed to the point where this traffic and these visits are looking like real users. We're seeing key presses, we're seeing mouse movements, we're seeing human-like interaction. And it's very difficult with existing controls to identify that accurately and then allow us to make the right judgments. So the motives that drive that and lead these actors to invest in those technologies and those capabilities to look really human-like are, it all comes down to economics and all comes down to money, of course, at the end of the day. So the first key motive for them is around stealing data. So getting in and grabbing pricing details, getting inventory numbers so that they can maybe compete better or do some analysis on which retailer is best to invest in or which retailer is potentially an acquisition target, or just purposefully to screw metrics, purposely to get in and misdirect the marketing teams and the budget to a different area. Second key motive is about accessing stored values and balances. This includes creating new accounts for the specific purpose of accessing store credit. But a much easier way to go about that is to break into a long-time customer's account that has an aged account and it's trusted, and access credit balances that are on that account. I can do that via stored cards on there, or I can do that via a gift card balance or other credit balance on there. And they will look for ways to take that money off of the platform and monetize elsewhere. Third motive is to interrupt and abuse. So this can be intended or it can be accidental based on some of the other activities. But a lot of this is driving people to really invest in the ways that they defeat and deceive the fraud technologies, security technologies that are in place. So let's look at some examples in retail specifically. Well, one of the key areas of attack is product pages and catalog, and all the things that surround this, add to cart and product search fields. So the motive here generally is data. The activity that, the kind of broad activities are things like scraping and scalping of products. But increasingly, we're seeing whole sites be scraped and set up as either a direct copy of the brand site in jurisdictions where the brand can't directly operate, a new market where through licensing or operating controls they can't operate. And that third party then takes the customer experience. They take that customer relationship. And at that point, you lose control, of course, of how you can engage with them, and you lose the customer. Not to mention all the legal ramifications of that issue. The impacts then on the things that we covered previously are big impacts on personalization. So the traffic on these kind of parts of the site, typically across our customer base, is greater than 63% fake. Greater than 63% of all visits, all impressions onto product pages and catalog searches is just fake traffic with no intent to convert. So if we look at our personalization platforms, which just inherently can't be one-to-one maps. You can't produce a personalization profile for every single customer. You have to group, you have to profile, you have to form cohorts. If I've got poisoned data in one of those cohorts, that leads me to produce a suboptimal journey for that particular profile. So we see 15 to 20% inefficiency in those personalization campaigns, and also the performance marketing that goes to driving customers through the door in the first place. So huge efficiencies can be gained by just making sure you're eliminating this from metrics, making sure you're not carrying through these impressions into the data you make decisions off. And the last element there is pricing. We need to make sure that our pricing is protected as long as possible to maximize the value in our inventory. Second key area in retail where we see a lot of abuse is on the logon. So behind this wall, I have customer PII. Sometimes I have stored balances. Sometimes I have just order details. There are many, many reasons why bad actors target this. And we see automated and fake traffic on these features on sites at 93%. 93% of all access, all logons are fake. Key activity there, credential stuffing, account takeover, these kind of campaigns I'm sure everyone's very well aware of. But the impacts are, it creates brand friction for the merchant and certainly for the consumer. If my account's taken over and maybe there's no stored balance on there, but I get a call from a bad actor with some very accurate data, the last order that I made, the product, the quantity, and they're just calling for feedback, they're calling for review. And by the way, can I just confirm my credit card details because there seems to be a problem with the processing the payment. It's very hard for me, unless I'm informed and a very kind of cynically minded person, to not engage in that conversation. And many, many people are fished in that way from these kind of features being abused. Now, the challenge is that doesn't hit the merchant, doesn't hit the merchant's pocket. What it does is it impacts the brand and it impacts the likelihood of that customer coming back. Now, if that's a one-time customer in a profile that you think is just transactional, maybe that's okay. If it's it's a customer with a high lifetime value, where we're making a lot of profit, essentially, there are profit centers, you're really doing a lot of damage to the business if we don't address this correctly and accurately. And the other impacts here are obviously fraud. If there is monetary balances being withdrawn, if there are fraudulent purchases being made. This is just an example of that in one of our customers during an on sale for a high demand good. So they saw significant amounts of traffic being flagged. 98% in their case of access to this logon field was automated. So this is a clear and present danger. Lots of fraud tools do this post fact. We'll talk a little bit about getting on the front foot and being more proactive around this. The last area I wanted to talk about in retail is more about process abuse. So with any user journey, of course, it's about an attractive promotion or an attractive offer that brings people in. We walk them through the user journey, try and make that as seamless as possible to the point they transact. So if I'm adding stuff to cart and I go to checkout, in many retailers that we work with, stock is held as soon as something's placed in cart. So if the bad actors are accessing the sites and they're adding things in and they're trying to check stock levels, what they will do is, through many fake accounts that they've set up, and through many different routes that they're coming in, they will try and check quantities by pushing the business to that point, seeing how many carts they can fill up before the inventory is exhausted. And they use that data in many ways, some to effectively extort the merchants, in other ways just to collect data, but it's preventing real customers from buying. Again, that impacts personalization, because if you're drawing metrics from what the most popular products are that are being added, and you're trying to understand why you've got a cart abandonment, very difficult if you're not differentiating between, was this sourced from a human and a real user that we'd want on the site, a converting customer, or was this fake traffic that we should just ignore? And there's the whole thing around controlling that and preventing this kind of process abuse around the retailer. So key challenges. And then a little bit about what we see within our retail customers. So how do we win in this game? First of all, what we're finding today is that it's a lot more effective when e-commerce, who are the owner of the data, the owner of the customer relationship, take ownership for this problem. And that's a number of reasons. So there's of course the fact that it directly impacts metrics that everyone gets paid on and the business is measured on. But the other key factor there is that it kind of falls between gaps, this problem. You've got fraud that are looking at the problem post-fact. They're looking at revenue protection, in essence. You've got security that are stretched in many, many different areas. They've got a governance piece to do with GDPR and PCI. They've got firewalls to protect, data centers to protect, internal employees to protect. So the protection of the application feature tends to come as an afterthought for them. And if there's not a problem, it's not a clear and present problem, then it tends to fall through the gap. So the first thing that we see really leads to success here is e-commerce taking ownership for this. E-commerce deciding that we need to do a much better job at knowing our visitor as well as drawing on data around our customers. Second is, what you need to do is accurately and in real time validate whether it's good, bad, or the sometimes ugly. And then be able to take confident early action. So we work extensively with our customers at building the right frameworks so that you're not pushing customers away by the questions you're asking them or the capture you're throwing them, but that you can make deterministic judgments about whether to let this through or whether to bounce the traffic. But that's essential. However you do that, be deterministic, make it in real time with as little challenge as possible. And then once you've dealt with that issue, once you've got that capability, what you can then, when you're knocking away the bad and you're controlling the sometimes ugly, what you can do is you can focus then on improving the good user journey. You can eliminate friction from the good user journey. So once we've dealt with the main bugbears of online, capture and tell me your postcode to be able to transact, what we can do is start to move to the more innovative e-commerce models around zero authentication. How can we be so confident, based on a profile we've seen of this customer before, that we let them in without authentication, without any step-up checks, without any fraud checks, and we transact that order, just based on how they're connecting and some other data we have before. We're doing that for some of the largest marketplaces and retailers in the US and increasingly Europe. Lastly, it's then how can we help to safely enable a one-click checkout? So how can we, again, reduce the burden, reduce the input, and allow someone to act on that impulse to buy without knocking them away or without forcing them to prove again who they are. That concludes my little tour of dealing with the good, the bad, and the sometimes ugly. There's probably a minute or so. There's no time for questions. But we're just at the stand just outside the door if anyone wanted a conversation afterwards. Some of my colleagues will be at the door with the beer tokens for the drinks reception afterwards as well. But I hope to see you all there. Thank you for your time.